it's Jen from Dream Prague. Today is my 8th Prague anniversary, which means it's been 8 years to the day since I moved to Prague. It's amazing because when you move to Prague, you meet people who've maybe lived here a month longer or like 4 months longer, and you think, wow, they know everything. They know where to buy cheddar cheese, they know how to properly order a beer, and then you meet someone who's been here for 2 years, and you think, they're an oracle, they know everything. Their Czech sounds flawless to you, and you just think, I can't believe they've been here for so long. I hope I make it to 2 years. So to be here for 8 years feels like a huge accomplishment for me and my husband. And to celebrate, I wanted to share with you the 8 ways that I have been changed by living in Prague. So the first way that I changed was superficial, but I lost 15 pounds within the first couple months of being in Prague. That's about 7-8 kilos. And I chalk it all up to how much walking you do in Prague. So in the United States, it's a car culture, you live in your car. So if you want to get exercise, you pay a lot of money every month to belong to a gym, but I of course work too much, so I never went to the gym. If I took a 2-mile walk to the beach, I was like very proud of myself and thinking I'd really gotten some fitness for the day. And then I moved to Prague, and I remember my shins, the front of my legs, aching from how much walking I was doing in the hills of Žižkov where I was staying. And even though we were taking the public transportation a lot, you just end up walking so much more. And I really think that that's why there's a obesity problem in the United States. The cities are just not set up for people to get natural exercise in their everyday life. It's a very sedentary culture. So you walk around Czech Republic and you just don't see very, very heavy people. I think you just have to be on your feet a lot and rely on your own foot power to get around. And I think that that adds to their fitness level. The second thing that changed about me was that in California, I used to absolutely love my car. When you turn 16, you get your driver's license, and to every American kid, this is like the ultimate freedom because, like I said, the cities are set up that you kind of live in one place and you buy and you go in other areas of town. So unless you have a car, you're relying on your parents. And we used to love our cars so much that we would go, my friends and I would drive around on what we called mini drives, which were like 45 minutes, an hour long. We would buy cigarettes and Diet Coke, and we would just drive around the city, like in loops, to go to the beach, to go downtown, just to see what was happening. We had no destination. The point was the drive. And there's this place in Los Angeles, famous street called Sunset Boulevard, and on Saturday nights we used to cruise Sunset Boulevard. We'd actually go in our cars and just drive back and forth on Sunset Boulevard, and of course everyone else is doing this too, so it's bumper to bumper traffic. And the point is to meet people in their cars. Find out where they're going, and then you can go with them to that club. I have been asked out on dates while I was driving on the freeway. I went out with a guy I met on the freeway. It's hard to explain how integral cars are to the culture of living in Southern California. And then of course, I moved to Prague, and I didn't have a car for the first 4 years, and it was wonderful. I never had to get parking tickets. I didn't have to pay for gas. I never have to worry about drinking at a bar and who's gonna be the designated driver, right? The sober person that's responsible for getting everybody home. I didn't have to worry that my designated driver had too much to drink. These are all sort of the ridiculous aspects of living in a car culture. And when I need to go downtown, you feel very light on your feet. I need to jump off the tram and maybe go here, maybe go there, and not really worry about where can I park, how much is parking, I can't leave my car here overnight, but I wanna have a beer. So you just feel very free without a car. And for me, driving is very perfunctory now. It's not enjoyable. We only ever drive the car if we're leaving Prague. In the city, we never use it at all. So the next way that Prague has changed me is my desire for consumer goods. Now there's an old Czech parable, and it goes like this. A Czech man did God a favor, and to repay the Czech man, God asked him, I'll give you anything, what would you like? And the Czech man said, you know, I only have this like old hen, but the guy next door, he's got a young goat. And God said, okay, shall I get you a young goat? And the Czech man said, no, I want his goat to die. And my Czech friends say, yeah, that's about right. Now, I don't know if that Czech mentality has seeped into my brain and I just don't want to have more than my neighbors, but I actually think there's a simpler explanation for it. The first is that goods are generally more expensive in the Czech Republic than in other parts of Europe. Like, people in the Czech Republic will actually go to Germany to go shopping because things are just cheaper there. And the salaries that you make in the Czech Republic are a lot less in the US, but an Apple computer still costs the same. So you can see why it's difficult to shop here. Also, for years, we never had the Amazon culture that developed in the States where you can just go online, find something, and it's at your door the next day. So we kind of didn't get accustomed to the convenience of that. If I needed something online, I would just like buy it if I went home to visit. But I just kind of thought, well, it's gonna cost a lot to get shipped here and it's not even worth it. The other reason for that is that flats are just smaller here. We have a 90 square meter flat. It's about 968 square feet, and our stuff just doesn't fit.
Hi, it's Editing Jen here. I just wanted to acknowledge that 90 square meters is a huge flat for Prague, and we are totally satisfied. We wouldn't want any bigger of a space. It's just that it's not as big as a typical house in America.
When we came from America, I'm embarrassed to say that we shipped all of our things. So our parents don't have any of our stuff in their houses, and we kept a third of our guest room filled with stuff that we didn't know what to do with. Things like collector's items, baseball cards, lacrosse sticks, hockey equipment, all of my craft supplies that I hadn't used in years. And we just kind of like threw a sheet over it and tried to pretend like it was a wall because we didn't know what to do with it. In the States, people have garages and they actually can't fit their car in because they're so filled with stuff, with old furniture, old things that people kind of keep. We even at one point paid for storage in a different part of the city to keep things that we didn't know what to do with. We couldn't bring ourselves to sell or give away, and so we actually paid money to keep those things in another place. And this is not abnormal in America. Once we got rid of that section of stuff in our guest room, we turned it into an office, and it's now a functional place. And I prefer to have sort of the open space for functioning creativity than a bunch of crap that that I don't know what to do with. So the next thing that changed about me was my relationship to money. So in the United States, I worked in a firm, and it was a salaried position, and I worked about 50 hours a week, and I made probably more than 5 times what I was able to make in the Czech Republic. But I didn't have the option of saying, can I work like 30 hours this week and you just pay me less? It wasn't an option. Whereas here, I'm a živnostník or živnostkyně. Živnostnička. Anyway, I'm an independent contractor. That's how most people start when they move here. So when I was English teaching, a school would hire me for a certain amount of hours a week, and that could fluctuate a lot. And I had private students, and that could fluctuate a lot. So I was given more freedom to sort of determine what my time was worth, and also if I didn't want to work, I was able to buy that time. So let me give you an example of that. Let's say there's a television in the United States, and I have this fancy job and I make all this money, and I get home and I hate my life, and so I buy this television. Well, here, because I'm earning hourly money, I can see very clearly the cost of the television and how many hours of teaching I would have to do in order to afford that. And I can make a clear decision in my mind, am I willing to sell my time for that material item? And I wasn't. what I wanted was the freedom to create and to do the different hobbies that I do. And so I really started to make the connection between time and money. I would like to do a whole video on how it changed my relationship to money, and I probably will, but that's the basics. The next way I've changed is what I look for in friends is different. So a typical person in the United States would make their lifelong friends in high school or in university. And that's your peer group. You're going through the same things in life at the same stages. Getting married, having kids, getting careers, this type of thing. And so your friend group stays very static. And it's fine, though it's great. These are people that you have a ton in common with, but you're not welcoming new people into that group. There's no opportunity to meet new people unless they move in next door or maybe you meet them at work. But when you are an expat and you move to another country, you become the type of person that values the different. That's the whole point. You're looking for the different experiences. So I'm not necessarily looking for the person that reflects, my age, my job type, my blah, blah, blah. I'm looking for the guy who came from Bangladesh. I wanna hear his story. I wanna see the artwork that my Mexican friend is producing and putting on Facebook. I wanna make friends with as many checks as I possibly can so I can understand what makes them tick, how they're different from me. And what this does is it opens up your peer group to people totally different ages, grandmothers, kids right out of college that come here. And I don't need to have them tick every box in what I look for in a friend that makes them my peer. I can find value in one or two things we have in common, and that brings me a lot of value. And the side benefit to this is when you meet these strange and different people, very often they're transient, they might live in a different country or a different place, and so all of a sudden you have friends all over the world. When I go to visit places like Japan or Switzerland or Italy, I'm staying with people that I have met through this journey. And so the world becomes smaller instead of just taking the friends that I made at a very young age and making that sort of a static group. I've opened up my horizons and I'm much more open to fostering new and interesting relationships. The next thing is that I've become more of an observer, and that has made me more empathetic. So part of this has to do with the language. When you don't speak the language that everyone on the street is speaking, you have to use visual clues to sort of stay alive, right? You have to be able to recognize if someone looks dangerous, if someone needs help. You have to be able to go to the pharmacy, the Lacarna, and sort of act out your medical issue if you can't verbalize it. So you need to become more in tune with more than just verbal cues. The second thing comes back to cars again. So in Los Angeles, I'm surrounded by 10,000 people on a freeway, but I don't have a relationship with them at all. My machine, my car, has a relationship with their machines. And it makes me more self-centered. I have my own needs. I'm not concerned about the machines around me. So I need to turn right, I need to get my machine in front of yours. When you are on public transportation or on the street, you're constantly being made aware of a broad cross-section of the city. So I will see older ladies, older gentlemen struggling to walk with walkers on cobblestone roads and to cross streets. There are blind people, a lot of blind people in Prague who rely on their other senses and their canes, but they're also relying upon the kindness of strangers to help sort of guide them so that they're not walking into an obstruction in the road. You can see mothers, tired mothers, pushing strollers, and you can sort of assess that they need you to help them carry the stroller up the tram. And they're, maybe rough-looking teenagers who notice that an old lady on the tram needs a seat and they jump up and help them. And so because you are forced to interact with people instead of your car with their cars, just in getting around, It makes you more empathetic. You start to be less self-centered, less thinking about the fact that you need to be at work in 10 minutes, and you realize that you're just part of a community rather than an individual. The next change is that I've realized that America is not the center of the world. No, but seriously, I never was one of the flag-waving Americans who thought that it was the greatest country on earth. My parents have lived abroad, and they instilled in me an appreciation for other cultures. But when you grow up in California, in Los Angeles in particular, you tend to think that your city is the center of the world. So I grew up in Los Angeles and Silicon Valley, and these are two places where people from all over the world flock to sort of make their fortunes. They're just an epicenter of what is happening in the world. And so when you're from there and people from all over the planet are coming there, you think, why would I ever leave? Why would I leave to go to a place that's less happening, there's less innovation, there's less influence on the world? And Czechs are actually kind of the opposite of this. When I tell them that I live here and I moved from California, they're like, why would you come here? As if I couldn't find a better life here in the Czech Republic. Now the Czechs are they're proud, but they have a healthy understanding of their country within the center of Europe. All the other places, they travel a lot more than Americans, all the other places that one could possibly live. And so what living in Prague has done for me is to realize that every city has goods and bads, and it's up to me to determine what I value and to find the place that suits what I value. And life in Prague is easy. It allows me to be creative. I'm surrounded by history. I really value history. And so these things at this stage in my life suit me better than my access to the beach. As much as I miss going to the beach all the time, that's not as important to me as the benefits that I get from living here. So no, not even California is the center of the world. The last way that I've changed is to realize that you don't have to be rich to live this life, or really to live any life. I mean, if your dream is to fly around in a private jet, you might need to be rich, but don't do that. That's terrible for the environment. So there's this myth in America that X equals success, whatever you deem that to be. And in order to get that, you have to do this. You have to study really hard so you can get into a good university. Then you have to work really hard so you can then get into a good graduate school. Work really hard so you can get a good job. Work really hard at that job so you can afford to put your kids in university. And then at the end of your life, if you've been a really good person, you've worked really hard, you can save enough money in retirement to do the thing you want to do. So for me, that was always to travel to Europe. And I've got two stories to illustrate how I've started to think differently about this. When I was 21, my mother took my sister and me to Europe, and we were in the south of France. And the south of France for Americans is like the epitome of luxury. But I remember noticing people on the streets and seeing bus drivers and teachers and students and just kind of people living normal lives. And I thought, these people are just living in the south of France and they're not doing anything special. I mean, they're speaking French, which I couldn't do, but maybe I could do that. Maybe I could be a regular person in a special place. And the second story happened many years later after I had already moved to Prague, and I was visiting friends in Italy that I'd met through my husband's job, and I took a €7 train down to Venice. And I'm sitting in St. Mark's Square next to a well-to-do middle-aged American couple and their two teenagers. And the teenagers were on their phones and bored and complaining about something. And I remember looking at this couple thinking, I know you. You are what I was going to become. You have worked so hard at jobs you probably don't like to afford the ostentatious, very expensive, top-of-the-line trip to take your family to Venice and probably Paris and probably London. And I am sitting next to you, enjoying the same view. And it took me being a regular person in a regular city, meeting someone in Italy who was generous enough to invite me to stay, and €7 on a train ticket, and we are enjoying the same view. I don't mean to disparage the United States, but I am American, and this was the life that was mapped out in front of me. And I just feel like it is impossible to see it while you're in it. And coming to Prague has allowed me to look at it from a distance and to think, there's a life to be had. I can live it right now. I don't have to wait until I'm old. I don't have to work at a job I don't like to be able to afford the most expensive vacation I can treat my family to. And that was the greatest gift, to understand that you have one life, you can live it how you want. It's all about adjusting your values and adjusting what's important to you. So if you are interested in the process of moving to Prague, I have a free course, How to Move to Prague, below, and you can sign up at the link. And if you're Czech, I want to thank you for being a gracious host to immigrants like me, because you may see the Czech Republic as very normal, and you might not get the same lessons that I get by living here. But what you have to teach immigrants, just by being courteous and kind to us, has changed our lives. So thank you for 8 years, and I hope to have another 8 here. Okay, tak čau. Ahoj, příští týden.